I'm Howard Green. Welcome to Connexion, our new interview series for Toronto Star. Well, we wanted to launch the new series with a real kapow, so we invited a guy named Geoff Smith, CEO of the big construction company EllisDon, started by his father and his uncle in 1951. Now, with about $5 billion a year in projects. It's hard to miss all the buildings they've put up. The hospitals, the Rogers Centre, the National Gallery, the Art Gallery of Ontario, libraries, you name it. Well, last winter, I heard Geoff speak at an event, and I was amazed that what he said did not make the news. In front of a business audience, get this, Smith said, quote, he was an unapologetic corporate socialist. Well, I've heard a lot of CEOs over the years, but I've never heard one say that. But that is Geoff Smith, and he is our guest today. It's great to have you with us.
Nice to be here. Let's have some fun.
Thanks for coming in. So, you know, before we get to the unapologetic corporate socialist, I want to get a little bit of how you got to that position, a bit of your odyssey. You run a construction company. You're not a builder. I've heard you say you're not a mechano-set guy.
Not
you
at all.
didn't even want to go into the business at first, right?
Well, that's exactly right. I knew I wanted to, in the end, I wanted to be Clarence Darrow in the beginning. I wanted to be the world's greatest lawyer. I did that for about 8 months and realized I didn't want to be a lawyer, and the world's greatest was beyond my ken. I did always want to go into business, just happened to be the construction business.
So what about going to EllisDon, though? Because your dad ran it. Your dad, I know, from what you've shared with me, was a tough, aggressive guy. He was not easy to work with. You worked with him.
So maybe talk about my dad a bit, but here's the main thing about my dad. He was tough, he was aggressive, but he gave everybody great opportunities. So you could move ahead as a youngster, as a very young person, or at EllisDon, and get real authority real fast. Then he'd run you out of the company, and he'd get more young people in to do it. And he went like that, and he had great success. So when I thought about it, I didn't really want to go work for my dad, but I knew I would get great experience, great opportunity, great leadership training on my own very quickly, and then I go do something normal. Didn't work out that way, but that was the plan.
But you went on to become president and COO for a number of years. You worked with him, right?
I did the legal stuff for a couple of years, which was good because I got into all the fights he was having. I learned a lot there. But then he sent me out to Calgary to run the Western operation. The only reason, I was 29, 30, the only reason I got that job, frankly, he'd fired everybody else, the last 4 people that he'd given it to. This is, without a hint of exaggeration in this part, nobody else would go. So he said, well, you gotta go. So I was kind of stuck, right? What do I do next? So I said, I'll go. And really quickly, maybe anticipating your next question, what I learned out there as a guy who didn't know anything about building was that I needed to surround myself with good people really quickly, and I needed to somehow convince them to stay, because I wasn't exactly the most inspirational guy at the beginning, the boss's son who's a lawyer who didn't know anything. So I started with begging, and then I got better. I got better from there. But that's how, those were the formative years for me in construction. You
know, we'll get to more of that, that connection to surrounding yourself with good people a bit later in detail. But then he ran you out of the company, basically, right?
So I was maybe a bit aggressive, frankly. I was maybe a bit too ambitious. I wanted to move quickly. Well, he thought it was his company. Strangely enough, he'd started it, he owned up most of the shares, so he thought he was the boss. I wanted to be the boss. But we were fighting over where the company was going. We were fighting over a couple of investment decisions, a big resort in St. Lucia. And in the end, by now I'm 40. I said to him, you're 70, I'm 40, what do we do here? And he said, well, I ain't leaving. So I left.
You left. But
I left, but I was probably at 5 minutes from getting getting hoofed. But I did leave 5 minutes ahead of the door.
But you came back, and then you had to deal with him again. But you set the terms when you came, because you got 6 siblings, and
yeah.
You know, you were very close to your mom.
My mom's my hero. Not afraid to admit that I'm a mama's boy. Proud of that fact.
Your dad said you were a mama's boy.
Well, he
in a not nice way.
When we were fighting before I left the company, he'd say, the problem with you is you're too much like your mother. I know we shouldn't be swearing in this interview, so I'll refrain from some of the adjectives he used. And I would say, that's fine with me. I'd rather be like her. that kind of stuff.
But he left, you stayed as CEO, right?
Yeah, he tried to sell the company when I was gone, and at the last minute that deal fell through, and a family friend called me and he said, "You've got to come back." And I said, "Well, I'll come back, but that company isn't big enough for both of us, and he's got to retire." Now he's 71, 72, and he retired.
And so this was and we're getting to the unapologetic corporate socialist. I promise everybody that. But this was 96, 97.
Yeah.
Business was tough. A lot of real estate businesses were going under. You guys were on the edge too, right?
Well, that's right. A lot of older people will know the early 90s were terrible in the development business. Everybody went broke. O&Y went broke. Cadillac Fairview went broke. Trizec went broke. They all went broke. All of our clients went broke. And because of our management dysfunction, let me put it that way, when the economy started to recover, kind of 95, 96, we were later because we were still floundering around trying to figure out, frankly, how to run the company and who was going to be in charge. So 97, 98, to say we were on the edge is almost an exaggeration. We were a bit over the edge and we pulled it back.
But I think one of the interesting things I've heard is that you had key people and they could have left, but they didn't leave.
Well, it's my favorite story, so I'll just tell it as quickly as I can, if that's okay. After a couple of years when we hadn't gone broke, and I thought about it, I thought, why didn't these people leave? They had management dysfunction at the top. All of our competitors were trying to get them to hire. I'm talking about the 7 or 8 or 9. So I went around and I asked them and why they didn't leave. I just wanted to know. And most of them said blah, 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 right? But one of them, a guy named Rick Magicomo, said to me, "Oh, we talked about it. And we thought about leaving, but we decided that it was a good company, that we liked working together, and we could save it, so we decided to stay and save the company."
And that changed you.
Well, first of all, I laughed at him. And I didn't laugh at him. I laughed at myself, I guess. I said, "Would you think about telling me that?"
Since I'm the owner.
He said, "What are you talking about? Get out of my office," right? Rick was he's a great Canadian in my view. So I said to him, "Carry on. Just carry on." And I'm not saying I don't do anything. I contribute. But I don't need to tell these people what to do. They know what to do. They were already doing it.
This is the surround yourself with good people part.
Well, what are you going to do? The great thing about EllisDon is we may have been broke, but we had a terrific group of builders at this company. So all you had to do was not go broke and then say to them, "Let's go build stuff."
So I mentioned earlier you have six siblings.
Yeah.
Your dad was gone. You were running the company, and you made a decision to give a big chunk of the company to the employees. Why did you do that? How much was it, and why did you do it?
I did it because I think we'll get to the corporate socialism in a minute. I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought it was the way to bind not just those key employees, but all of the employees of the company. But frankly, it wasn't just idealism and apple pie.
It wasn't tax reasons, succession reasons, anything
There was
like
none of that. We didn't have to do any of that. There was a family trust. That's why my siblings were involved. There was all that stuff. That had nothing to do with it. In fact, I had to debate with them very vigorously, if I may put it that way, to get them to do this. I believed, selfishly, the family would be far better off financially owning 55% of the company and giving 45% of it away. And I think that's been proven beyond all measure.
Because the employees feel a sense of ownership? Just
Exactly right. And we would have meetings and they would give me hell as shareholders and say, "Why are we doing this? Why are we still in the United States?" I said, "Don't give it patience." They said, "We're not very patient. That's a stupid idea." So I got out of the United States, right? We were very engaged as a management team, and by management I mean a lot, like a few hundred people, in the future of the company.
So you didn't sell the company to the public markets, no IPO, which is all the rage. You could have made a lot of money selling it to the public markets, presumably.
Right.
And you didn't. Or selling to private equity. You didn't do that.
Right.
And so is this the corporate socialist starting to emerge here? I mean, it's a funny term.
We can be pragmatic, and I'm going to have to modify the corporate socialism so we don't go way off the deep end. I'm going to back it up, and I'm going to back away a little bit. But we didn't just do it because it was the right thing to do. We did it because it was a very, I'm going to say, intelligent, free enterprise move. And so while it's not intuitive because people don't naturally do it, You don't need to go to the public markets when you're in construction. If you do it right, it funds itself. People go to the public markets for succession reasons and for growth reasons. Growth, we can fund ourselves. And the IPO, you just get into this, they just want to make a lot of money and sell it generally. Excuse me for offending any IPO people out there. We didn't want to do any of that either. And so now what we've learned we can do is grow and then buy the family out gradually and let the employees take it, and everybody made out like a bandit.
And that has occurred since then over these last 20. What's the ownership
We
now?
went from 45 to 50, and then about 2 years ago we accelerated the process. We're now at about 65% employee owned, and within, I want to say 15 years maximum, we'll be 100% employee owned. The Smiths will be out of the company.
And so when you said unapologetic corporate socialist, before the Canadian Club audience, I should tell people, I kind of, I thought it was fascinating, but B, I also thought it was kind of amusing. It's a bit like jumbo shrimp, right?
Okay.
Corporate socialist, military intelligence, jumbo shrimp.
I see. I got it now. Slow on the uptake. So, listen, I'm not a socialist with a capital S. I believe that people should work for a living. I don't believe in being on the public purse if you don't need to be.
You're a free enterprise guy.
I'm a free enterprise guy. And if you don't have a perfect job, but you can't find a perfect job, you need to stick with the unperfect job and work your way out of it. I'm an old classic small L liberal, I guess. But I never have believed, and I still do not understand why capital rules the day.
Like why on top in the
and everybody else works for capital. Well, it's just money. And money isn't always that intelligent. Where is the morality in saying, after you pay people and after you get a normal return on your investment, capital gets 100% of the rest? Doesn't make sense to me. So, there's no way to motivate people either, but it just plain isn't moral.
Did people stop talking to you because of what you said in that speech?
A few people said to me, listen, I saw your speech and that was very interesting, and I haven't heard a lot from them since. Not many.
They said it's interesting in a not nice kind of way.
In a dismissive sort of a way, like knock yourself out, you don't know what you're talking about. But to be fair, I had a lot of people say, primarily young people, I'll acknowledge, say, wow, that was terrific, and thank you for saying that.
Is that a reflection maybe of Reaganism having run its course? I mean, 41 years since he was elected president, not much trickled down to people as was promised. Is that where part of this
I do believe that, but it's anybody's guess, that let's call it corporatism or runaway capitalism is now facing a pushback. And people are saying there's got to be a better way to do this. I have to say that didn't inform my thinking, but I think a lot of people are rethinking that. And I think if corporate Canada and corporate America doesn't rethink how they govern themselves and what their philosophy is, we could be in for some unrestive times.
So tell me a little bit more about this being a people-centric company. You've said there are no secrets in our business. We have no exclusive intellectual property. We're just a bunch of people. Is that playing it down a little bit? I mean, it's highly skilled people.
Listen, we really only want, you've got to be good to work at EllisDon. And if you're not good, and so we talk about the idealistic part of it, but one of our values is mutual accountability, which means, frankly, putting it bluntly, if you're not doing your job, you either got to go do another job in the company or get out of the company. There's no place to hide. When you show everybody all the facts and you're completely open, nobody gets to hide. Not the CEO, not the receptionist, not anybody.
So it's not kumbaya around there?
It's not. It's a bunch of really hardworking people who don't put up with a lot of guff if you're not performing.
And so are you able to find those kind of, I mean, everybody's talking about labor shortages
So let's get back to the thinking about why you rely on your people. I believe it's a virtuous circle, but let's start at the beginning. People want meaning in their lives. People want to do something they love doing, and they want the freedom to do what they're good at as much as possible. If you can give them that, and you can bring yourself to trust them and not have all these policies telling them what to do, they'll stick with you forever, and they'll work really hard. So, and then you attract better people, because you say, you know what, come over to EllisDon. We've got fewer policies than our competitor. You get to do what the hell you want. You got to stay in your box a little bit, and you got to be fully accountable. Other than that, we trust you to do it. The good people say, I want to work for you. I want to work over there.
So you give people a long leash. but it must churn your stomach sometimes. Like, where is this guy? I remember you telling a story about a guy named George who flitted off to China or something. You couldn't find him in the lunchroom, and you were having conniptions, right?
I was the CEO. I was doing something very important. I was trying to figure out who was going to sit where at the corporate Christmas party at the head tables. This is heavy CEO stuff. So I went to George to tell him he couldn't sit at one of the big tables. They said he's in China, just for your viewers who haven't heard it. I said, what's he doing in China? Well, they said, he's trying to find manufacturing for that, this is about 10 years ago, for that new formwork system that he invented. And I, of course, said, what new formwork system that he invented? But I trust George implicitly. George, he's not with us. He actually went off to start his own formwork manufacturing company, but that's okay too. He's a brilliant guy. I trust him. I know he's doing good work. And so knock yourself out.
And so how often can you do that, though? I mean, that's a tough thing to do. I mean, you need people around minding the store, building the. I see your signs all over town, all over the country. You need people around to build.
Listen, that was an extreme story, but it's a story that illustrates the freedom that people get to do what they want. So all those people you see behind those signs on our job sites are hopefully free to do their job. They know what they've got to do. They know what's got to be done. I don't need to tell them how. I don't even need to tell them why or what. They just know. And you let them go, and they will go. And frankly, it frees me and some of the others up to do other stuff, like grow the company.
So let's get to some of the big issues of the day. Sure. And it's not like there aren't many. COVID, for one, we had to take rapid tests to get into this studio with each other. Climate, diversity on a whole lot of different levels. So let's start with the pandemic first. How have you managed to successfully navigate the pandemic?
We tried again to be leaders and to be very open. So it started off with frankly convincing the provincial governments that we could run construction safely when people wanted to shut it down.
And so your workers couldn't be virtual to build a building; they had to be on site.
They have to show up. And you remember in the early days of the pandemic, it was very scary. And I talked with not just people; I talked with their spouses. We said, "Why are you making my husband or wife come to work? This is crazy." He said, "We can do it safely." So the first part was convincing people, they were all over us, and the rest of the industry that the industry could operate safely. We worked very closely with the trade unions here. I don't want to say EllisDon did this. We were the first to embrace rapid testing on our sites. A year ago, now everybody's doing it. Frankly, 18 months ago, we were the first ones to do it. And now, and I just sent out an email yesterday saying, if you're not vaccinated, you're a salaried employee at EllisDon, you won't be working here post-November the 30th. I'm sorry, but we are mandating vaccinations. We are safe, and that's all there is to it.
And so you also set up vaccination clinic for the public, too. You did. I mean, that was, a public service, if I can say.
It was a bit of a public service. It started off,
good PR,
we wanted to do all of the unionized trade workers. And when it turned out most of them were already vaccinated by the time we got this thing going, we just opened it up to the public. So it started off, it wasn't for EllisDon, but it was for the industry. And then we just opened it up to the whole community, and it was terrific. Was it good PR? Didn't hurt. Was it a good thing to do, and were our employees proud of that kind of leadership? Yes, they were.
What's been the impact on the culture of the pandemic?
Of the pandemic, we think we're losing the culture. We are really worried. I'm not going to say everything's great because we don't think everything is great. When you've got a culture-driven company, as a lot of people think they do, and everybody's at home, how do you get that? And so we want people back at work. We think we are a bit old school in thinking the exchange of ideas, the exchange of personalities, the exchange of values is really important, and it has been seriously lacking over the last 16, 17 months. It's a big problem.
So how do you fight that if you feel like you're losing the culture, which is so important to you? And
well, it's frankly really difficult, but we've got really strong leadership who do a lot of things online. We try and communicate. I've read all the best practices people do, and it's all kind of the same. But now we're trying to bring them back to work. And remember, 70% of our people work on the sites anyway.
Yeah, right.
But still, at the office, in the leadership, especially with the new people, we've got senior people who've never been in the office, who I've never met.
That makes me pause. What about mental health?
Mental health is, a friend of mine in BC pointed it out early in the pandemic, and I didn't get it. And now I get it. Mental health has been the biggest issue, more than physical health, meaning people have been more affected, in my humble view, by serious mental health problems in their families themselves than the suffering by the people who got COVID. I say that respectfully to people who, and I've got some friends with long-haul COVID, but the mental health issue has been terrible. I can feel it myself. I get stuck at home, locked in. I get depressed.
Anxious?
I get anxious. And so then our people are getting anxious. I don't have any kids at home. Our people with teenage kids or preteens at home, they're stuck. I have a reasonably nice place to go home to, frankly. They're stuck in a smaller place. The spouse is working in the basement. The kids are going crazy. Serious mental health issues.
You know, we could do a whole hour about that. And
all I can say is we've opened up all sorts of resources to our people, as many as we can possibly think of, and we say, please come forward. We'll do everything it takes.
You know, there are a number of other things I want to touch on, and one is climate. I highlighted that earlier. And I think you've said publicly that over time, buildings are going to consume more carbon than emit it. Is that your goal? Is that what you're trying to do right now?
This is going to be the most disruptive in a positive way thing to hit the construction industry probably in all time. We are, by any measure, 30 to 35% between the way we build and what we build. And we've got to get it to zero by 2050, and we've got to cut it by at least a third by 2030.
Right.
That will affect I'll try and do this quickly. It affects design. It affects supply chain. It affects the product itself. It affects the way we're going to have to make concrete and steel. These manufacturers, producers know we've got to do it, and we're all over it. But we're all in this together. The clients are going to have to pay a big premium, and it's going to take a while.
So give me one example of how a building will consume carbon rather than emit it.
Well, first of all, you got to work on the consumption piece. You've got to work on the emittance. You've got to make sure that steel and concrete and the various pieces that go into the building and materials don't emit a lot of carbon. Then at least you can start from a good place. We're starting from a terrible place right now. But then, of course, you just do the best you can. Digitize HVAC systems. Timber will be big. All trees everywhere. Green roofs.
Shading windows.
Green everything. Shaded windows. There's a great deal you can do just by running buildings more efficiently. You know, a big curtain wall that creates power rather than reflects and
like a solar wall. Solar
exactly.
Curtain.
There's lots of ways you can. To me, if you can get to zero on the materials and the production side, doing the other side is easier.
So this speaks to the whole digitization as well of buildings.
Exactly.
So obviously everything's gone digital software, but I sometimes struggle to understand how a building goes digital and what that means for me as somebody who works in that building.
So it's sometimes difficult for me to understand, and I'm still coming to my understanding of it, and I'm talking about things that sound a bit science fiction. But think about a building, because we have to start thinking this way, not as a physical static piece, but as an organic, something that exists organically, meaning that it can change as it goes along. And it does it digitally.
Like on a daily basis because of the weather, for instance.
That's exactly right. And so that affects, and so think about a building as an experience for the people who work there, not as something that protects them from the cold and from the heat and all of that stuff, but as something that delivers to them not just services but an experience.
And you don't mind data being collected as a building operator?
I have a theory.
That's controversial.
Let's go to data in a minute. We can do it. I'll give you my view pretty quickly, but remember, we are now creating buildings on computer. If they really get organic, the building will exist. You talk about building replicas. Everybody says the building replica. We replicate the building on the computer. No, you build the building on the computer and you replicate the building in real life. You want to change the building, you change it on the computer, and it changes organically in real life. That's where we got to get to. Do I understand all of what I just said? No. But unless we start thinking that way, we don't get there.
And so collecting data to do all that kind of thing is okay?
My view on data is, our clients say it's our data, we want it. I say it's my data because I need it. Our subs say, well, we're doing all the work, it's our data. My view on data, which is not shared by everybody in EllisDon, is make it available to everybody.
To the public.
Give the clients the data, give me the data, give the subs the data, give my competitors the data. I do not care. Let's get the data out there. I'd rather keep it frankly, in Canada, within the industry, then send it to the Silicon Valley people who want to put us out of business. That's logical. But within that group, and whoever makes the best use of the data, more power to them.
You know, I want to turn to something. This has all been challenging to talk about, I know, because they're huge issues, but I want to come to something that's even more challenging, arguably. And I'll preface it because I've heard you say the best management advice you ever got was go to where the trouble is. Yeah. I've heard you say that. Yeah. So I'm going to go to where the trouble is. Yeah. There were nooses on construction sites targeting black employees, and it didn't happen just at your company. It happened at others, I understand. How did you go to where the trouble is on that one? How do you deal with these issues of the moment that have been with us for centuries, but have only come into sharp relief for a lot of people recently?
So here's what we did, and I will brag about EllisDon on this basis. As soon as those nooses appeared at the Michael Garron Hospital in Toronto, we said, okay, we've got a big problem. Some of our competitors who had nooses said, put that noose in the garbage. We said, no, this is a huge problem and we're going to embrace it. And for about 2 months, we were ridiculed as the racist construction company because we were the only one that embraced, in a negative way, obviously, the fact that we had nooses. Secondly, I'll tell you, we had a big community meeting, and one of the women, who had nothing to do with the construction business, she runs a store right by the site, and it was a Zoom meeting. So there's 100 people on the Zoom meeting, but they've got me on the thing, and they're going, she says to me, you told me, Geoff, Mr. Smith, that you didn't know anything about racism in the construction, that you'd never heard of this kind of racism, which I had said 15 minutes earlier. And she said to me, how incompetent are you really if you didn't have any idea?
As the CEO.
And as a leader in the industry.
And so did you feel like just packing it in at that point?
I said, you got me there. Because clearly the racism has been there. And let's be clear about it. It's primarily in the construction industry, or it's more than its fair share in anti-black racism. I don't know why. But I think we have to face it. I think I have to say it here. And so A, we embraced it. B, we went out to the community and said we've got a problem. Went out to everybody and said we've got a problem. Then people started coming on board. The unions, by the way, have been also very good at this. I have to throw that out there. And then we started these initiatives. And the one thing we did at EllisDon was we made these initiatives employee-led. What am I going to do as the incompetent CEO who didn't know anything about racism in my own industry? We've got a lot of racialized people in the company. They can tell us about racism, and they can tell us what needs to be done about it. And that's the journey we're on.
So are you on a journey toward quotas, not just related to anti-black racism or people of color, but also on a gender basis?
We're having a big debate about quotas, and you can read all sorts of literature about whether they're a good idea or whether they're a bad idea. We're on a journey towards very rigorous measurement. I like the idea of quotas around recruiting, bringing people into the company. If we're not hiring, if we don't look like Canada on the people, to use Trudeau's phrase, on the people we're hiring, then we've got a problem. So let's measure that. And I think there should be, if quotas and measurement are really the same thing, why aren't we doing what we said? As you go up, you need to promote on meritocracy. But you've got to bend over backwards to make sure you're training people of color, and in this industry, women, to make sure that, so we talk about hiring and promoting on brains, on values and ethics, not on demonstrated skills. Is that easy to do? No, because we need a superintendent to build a big building that and so we haven't done a good job of giving a lot of other than white males, those skills. We've got a heavy training piece in front of us.
Just a couple of minutes left, and I just want to hit on a couple quickies before we go, if you don't mind. How's the economy? Is there inflation? Is the Bank of Canada wrong? Are the bank CEOs right about inflation? And what's your
Well, let
sense?
me tell you what Tiff Macklem and Dave Mackay at the RBC, because I know more about this than they do, as you will know. Well, okay, that was just me I'm being sarcastic, for crying out loud. But I'll just tell you what I see at the front lines. What I see is it looks to me like Tiff Macklem is right. In other words, the Bank of Canada is right on the supply chain stuff. It looks to me lumber's went way up, it's come way down. You see that. But I think that the bankers have got it right on the labor supply. At least in our industry, we're looking at a labor supply shortage that's going to go on for a decade. That's inflationary.
And what's your biggest worry then?
the biggest worry is we just do not have the people at the trades level or at the management level to build the huge demand for buildings that is coming across Canada right now.
Across the country. So we're going to see more and more cranes across the country. Toronto specifically, because this is Toronto Star, we're going to see more and more cranes in this city, even though we've seen them for 20 years.
It gets a little complicated because inflation will get some of those projects canceled. And so, you know, subcontractors who can't find people raise their prices. But is there an ongoing demand, especially in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, et cetera, and even in some of the smaller cities? Absolutely. We'll be building for a long time if we can find the people.
So the skyline's going to continue to change across this country.
I really believe it is, yeah.
And what about you? You've been CEO a long time. Just to wrap up, how much longer?
It's an interesting question. I'll do this real quick because I hope my wife isn't watching. But what I'm doing is I'm turning the management over to a great team. I am 66, but I've told them, I got to do something. Seriously, I have to do something. And so I'd like to go to work on the digital side and let the other people take everything else.
The digital side of the company.
And the digital side of the industry.
And the digital side of the industry.
I think that's where the future is. I think that's something I can help out with, and I think it's something I'd find fascinating without getting in the way of the leaders that really, their time has come to run the company.
It's been fantastic having you with us.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I love talking. and I love to see you, Howard. You're a great guy.
Thanks for coming in, Geoff. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thanks to all of you for watching our inaugural episode of Connection. We will have a new one every 2 weeks for you. You can also listen to the show via our podcast on all the major podcasting platforms. And there will be excerpts of our conversations in Toronto Star and on digital platforms. I'm Howard Green. Thanks for watching. See you next time.